The Galactic Council chamber hummed with the quiet efficiency of 1,000 civilizations conducting business across the stars. Ambassador Zeftar of the Corvan Republic adjusted his ceremonial robes as he reviewed the day's agenda on his neural interface. Trade disputes between the Centauri Mining Consortium and the Vegan Agricultural Collective. Border negotiations in the Outer Rim. Standard diplomatic fare that had kept the galaxy stable for 3 millennia. What wasn't standard was the unscheduled transmission request that appeared on every council member's personal communicator simultaneously. The chamber fell silent as representatives from dozens of species noticed the anomaly. Zeftar's 4 eyes narrowed as he read the sender identification. The message was short, written in perfect galactic standard, but originating from coordinates that shouldn't have been possible. Broadcasting from Sol System, 3rd planet. Requesting immediate audience with the Galactic Council. We believe it's time we had a conversation about old debts and new capabilities. Signed, the Terran Federation. A ripple of confusion spread through the assembled delegates. The Sol System was a restricted zone, quarantined since the early days of the Council. No civilization had been permitted contact with the primitive species that inhabited the 3rd planet. The quarantine had been established by the ancients themselves before their mysterious disappearance from known space. Council Speaker Vorthak, a towering crystalline being whose species had held the speaker position for the last 5 centuries, called for order. His voice resonated through the chamber's translation matrix, reaching every delegate in their native tongue. This appears to be some form of elaborate hoax, Vorthak declared. The Sol System remains under quarantine protocols established by the Ancient Council. No species from that system possesses the technology for interstellar communication, let alone knowledge of our existence. As if summoned by his words, the chamber's main holographic display activated without authorization. The security breach alone should have been impossible, but what appeared on screen made several delegates gasp in their various respiratory fashions. A human face looked out at them. The being appeared unremarkable by galactic standards, bilateral symmetry, forward-facing eyes, skin that seemed to shift colors slightly in the light. But there was something in those eyes that made Zeftar's chitinous plates rustle with unease. Intelligence, yes, but also a weight of purpose that seemed far too heavy for such a young-looking creature. "Greetings, members of the Galactic Council," the human said, its voice carrying clearly through the translation matrix. "My name is Admiral Sarah Chun, representing the Terran Federation on behalf of all humanity. I apologize for the unorthodox introduction, but we felt it was time to announce ourselves properly." Chaos erupted in the chamber. Representatives shouted in dozens of languages, their translators struggling to keep up with the cacophony of disbelief, outrage, and fear. Security protocols activated, sealing the chamber and jamming all external communications. Emergency signals flashed as the Council's most advanced AI systems tried and failed to trace the source of the transmission. Through it all, Admiral Chun waited with the patience of someone who had expected exactly this reaction. Vorthak's crystalline form pulsed with authoritative light as he restored order. "This is impossible. The species of Sol 3 lacks the cognitive development for space travel. Our last survey, conducted merely 800 standard years ago, showed them in a pre-industrial state, fighting with metal weapons and wooden sailing vessels." A smile played across Admiral Chen's features. 800 years. Yes, we remember that survey. We remember a lot of things, Speaker Vorthak, including the visitors who came to us much earlier than that. The human's image shifted, replaced by historical records that should not have existed. Holographic displays showed Earth as it had been thousands of years ago, a blue world covered in ice, with scattered groups of primitive humans struggling for survival in a hostile climate. 12,000 years ago, my people faced extinction. The last ice age was ending, but slowly. Food was scarce, populations were dying, and We had not yet developed the tools necessary to overcome our environment. We were, by any measure, a failing species. The display changed, showing crude cave paintings that depicted strange figures descending from the sky. Beings that looked remarkably similar to several species represented in the current council. But then they came. The helpers, we call them in our earliest stories. 3 species working together to save a dying world. They taught us agriculture, showed us how to work metals, gave us mathematics, and writing. They accelerated our development by thousands of years, pulling us back from the brink of extinction. Zeftar felt his blood chill as he recognized the cave paintings. The tall, graceful figures with elongated limbs could only be Altarians. The compact, broad-shouldered beings matched historical descriptions of the ancient Corvan explorers. And the third species, with their distinctive cranial ridges and 6-fingered hands, were unmistakably the ancestors of the current vegan delegation. They left us gifts, Admiral Chen continued. Not just knowledge, but artifacts, tools, and technologies that we couldn't understand at the time, with instructions to keep them safe until we were ready to comprehend their true purpose. The display now showed a series of objects that made every xenoarchaeologist in the chamber lean forward. Crystal matrices that pulsed with energy. Metal alloys that seemed to bend light around themselves. Organic computers that appeared to be still functioning despite their incredible age. We were told that someday, when we had grown wise enough and strong enough, we would understand these gifts. We were told that the helpers would be proud to see what we accomplished. What they didn't tell us was that they intended to forget we ever existed. The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Ancient memories stirring in species that preferred to think of themselves as enlightened and ethical. Delegate Sirithal of the Altarian Collective stood, her melodious voice carrying clearly through the chamber. If what you claim is true, then you speak of events from the time of reaching, when our species first ventured beyond our home systems. But that era ended in tragedy. The civilizations we contacted either destroyed themselves or were destroyed by others. We learned that uplifting primitive species was dangerous, both to them and to us. The quarantine protocols were established to prevent such tragedies from recurring. Admiral Chen's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes grew colder. Dangerous to whom? Exactly? Because from our perspective, the only danger was to your own consciences. The display changed again, now showing records that made several delegates gasp in recognition. Ancient Altarian databases, their security codes cracked, and contents laid bare. Corvan exploration logs that had been classified for millennia. Vegan agricultural reports that documented their earliest expansion efforts. We spent centuries wondering why our helpers abandoned us. We preserved their memory in our religions, in our stories, in the careful guardianship of their gifts. We waited for them to return, as they had promised. When we finally developed the technology to listen to your communications, we learned the truth. The documents scrolled past, each one a damning piece of evidence. Reports describing Earth's population as intellectually limited. Recommendations that contact be severed before the humans developed aggressive tendencies. Proposals to relocate the species to a more suitable environment before terminating the Uplift project. You didn't abandon us because we failed. You abandoned us because we succeeded too well. Because we grew too quickly, learned too fast, and showed too much independence for your comfort. You were afraid of what we might become. The chamber fell into stunned silence. The implications were staggering. If the humans were telling the truth, then the foundational myths of the modern Galactic Council, that they were benevolent shepherds guiding younger species toward enlightenment, were built on a lie. But we never forgot, Admiral Chen continued. We never forgot the debt we owed to the 3 species that saved us from extinction. We preserved every lesson, cherished every gift, and promised ourselves that someday we would repay that debt with interest. The display now showed images that made every military advisor in the chamber reach for their emergency communication devices. Massive space stations orbiting Earth, their design incorporating elements from all three helper species, but evolved far beyond anything in current galactic arsenals. Ships that seemed to bend space around themselves as they moved. Weapons that channeled energy in ways that violated several, supposedly fundamental laws of physics. We've been busy during our quarantine. 12,000 years of development, guided by technologies your ancestors couldn't imagine we would ever understand. Every breakthrough carefully documented, every advancement tested and refined. We've become everything you were afraid we might become, and more. Admiral Chun leaned forward, and, for the first time, her diplomatic composure slipped slightly. But here's what you never understood about humanity. We never forget our debts. We never abandon those who helped us. And we never, ever leave family behind. The display showed the galaxy as viewed from Earth's new perspective. Trade routes mapped in perfect detail. Military installations identified and cataloged. Communication networks monitored and understood. The quarantine had been completely one-sided. While the galaxy had forgotten about Earth, Earth had been watching everything. Your civilizations are stagnant. You've been so focused on maintaining stability that you've forgotten how to grow. Your technologies have barely advanced in the last 1,000 years. Your societies have become rigid, bureaucratic, afraid of change. You've built a galaxy-spanning civilization based on the principle that the status quo is sacred. She gestured to something outside the camera's view, and new images appeared. Worlds that had been abandoned because they were economically unviable. Species that had been denied council membership because they were culturally incompatible. Entire star systems quarantined because they contained potentially disruptive elements. But we remember what it was like to struggle. We remember what it felt like to face extinction and fight our way back from the brink. We remember that growth requires risk, that progress demands change, and that the greatest achievements come from embracing the unknown rather than fearing it. The display now showed Earth as it currently existed. Cities that stretched from ocean to ocean, their architecture blending organic curves with crystalline spires. Orbital habitats that housed billions of humans in environments that seemed to defy physics. A world transformed but not destroyed. Advanced but not sterile. We've been preparing for this moment for centuries. Not for war. We learned long ago that violence is the tool of the desperate and the unimaginative. We've been preparing to fulfill our promise, to repay the debt we owe to the three species that saved us, and to offer that same gift to others who need it. The implications hit the chamber like a physical force. The humans weren't here to take revenge for their abandonment. They weren't seeking recognition or reparations. They were offering to do for others what had been done for them, but they were doing it openly, honestly, and without the patronizing oversight that had characterized the ancient uplift programs. The galaxy is full of struggling species. Worlds where civilizations are dying because they lack the knowledge to save themselves. Systems where wars rage because people don't know how to communicate across their differences. Entire sectors cut off from the galactic community because they don't meet arbitrary standards of development or compatibility. Admiral Chin stood, and, suddenly, the simple uniform she wore seemed more impressive than any ceremonial robes or decorative armor in the chamber. We offer our services, not as conquerors or rulers, but as equals helping equals. We've learned from your mistakes and our own successes. We know how to help without controlling, how to teach without demanding gratitude, how to uplift without creating dependence. The chamber remained silent, but it was the silence of 1,000 minds trying to process a complete paradigm shift. The quarantined primitives from Sol 3 were offering to do what the Galactic Council claimed as its highest purpose, but to do it better. We're not asking for permission, Admiral Chin continued. We're offering partnership. Join us, and we'll show you technologies that will revolutionize your civilizations. We'll share knowledge that will solve problems you didn't even know could be solved. We'll help you remember what it feels like to grow, to explore, to achieve things you never thought possible. The display showed star charts with markers indicating systems throughout the galaxy. Hundreds of them, each representing a species or civilization that could benefit from human intervention. Some were primitive societies struggling with basic survival. Others were advanced civilizations trapped by their own success, stagnating in comfortable mediocrity. Or don't join us. Stand back and watch as we do what needs to be done. Because we're going to repay our debt whether you help us or not. We're going to save the struggling civilizations that you've written off as lost causes. We're going to uplift the species that you've deemed not ready for galactic society. We're going to show the galaxy what it looks like when someone actually cares about helping rather than controlling. The implications were staggering. If the humans could do what they claimed, if they really had technologies and knowledge that surpassed the current galactic standard, then they could reshape the balance of power across known space. Species that had been relegated to minor roles could become major players overnight. Civilizations that had been dismissed as irrelevant could become influential powers. We start tomorrow, Admiral Chun announced. Our first mission will be to the Kepler 442 system, where the Threnodidae are facing extinction due to a dying star. Your council classified them as economically non-viable for relocation assistance. We classify them as people who need help. The display showed detailed plans for stellar engineering on a scale that made the assembled delegates question everything they thought they knew about the limits of technology. The humans weren't just planning to relocate a struggling species. They were planning to save their star. After that, we moved to the Perseus Arm, where 17 different species are locked in territorial wars because they lack faster-than-light communication technology. We'll give them the tools to talk to each other instead of fighting. More plans appeared. Technologies that could restore dead worlds to life. Techniques for peaceful first contact that went far beyond anything in the Council's playbooks. Methods for accelerating social and technological development without creating cultural dependence. Then, we head to the Outer Rim, where the Zeta Reticuli colonies have been cut off from galactic civilization because they developed incompatible social structures. We'll show them that diversity of thought and culture is a strength, not a weakness to be corrected. The scope of what the humans were proposing was breathtaking. They weren't just offering to help a few struggling worlds. They were proposing to fundamentally reshape how galactic civilization approached the concepts of progress, cooperation, and mutual aid. This is what we learned from your gifts, Admiral Chin said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. Not just the technologies you gave us, but the principle behind them, that those who have the ability to help others have the obligation to do so. That leaving someone to struggle when you could ease their burden is the worst kind of selfishness. That true civilization is measured not by what you achieve for yourself, but by what you enable others to achieve. She paused, letting the words sink in. When she spoke again, her voice carried a note of sadness that made even the most cynical delegates feel uncomfortable. You forgot that lesson. You let fear make you small. You built a galaxy where stability mattered more than growth, where order was valued above justice, where the comfortable status quo was preserved at the cost of countless lives that could have been saved. The display now showed a time-lapse view of galactic history over the past millennium. The same trade routes, the same power structures, the same carefully maintained boundaries between the civilized core worlds and the primitive frontier systems. A galaxy that had achieved perfect stagnation. But we remember what it felt like to face extinction and be saved by the kindness of strangers. We remember the gift of knowledge that transformed our world. We remember the promise that someday we would be strong enough to help others the way we were helped. Admiral Chen's image moved closer to the camera, and suddenly, every delegate in the chamber felt as if she were speaking directly to them. That day has come. The children you saved have grown up, and they're ready to make their parents proud. The debt we owe can never be fully repaid, but we're going to spend the rest of our existence trying. And when we're done, the galaxy will be a place where no one struggles alone, where every species has the opportunity to reach its full potential, and where the word quarantine is remembered only as a relic of a time when we were too afraid to hope for better. The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in absolute silence. The implications hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. The humans had just declared their intention to revolutionize galactic civilization, and they had the knowledge and technology to back up their claims. More importantly, they had just reminded every species in the chamber of their own forgotten ideals. The principles that had supposedly guided the formation of the Galactic Council. The dreams of cooperation and mutual advancement that had been slowly strangled by bureaucracy and fear. Ambassador Zeftar looked around the chamber and saw his own confusion reflected in dozens of faces from dozens of worlds. The quarantined primitives from Sol 3 had just offered to teach the galaxy what it meant to be civilized. And the most terrifying part was that they were probably right. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been running for 18 standard hours, and tensions in the chamber had reached a breaking point. Ambassador Zeftar watched as Speaker Vorthax struggled to maintain order among delegates who seemed ready to abandon millennia of diplomatic protocol. The Corvin delegation had been particularly vocal, with elder statesman Krell ADH pounding his ceremonial staff against the floor as he spoke. This is unprecedented. We cannot simply allow an unrecognized species to interfere with established galactic law. The quarantine protocols exist for good reason. And what reason would that be? The voice came from Delegate Sirithal of the Altarian Collective, her usually melodious tone sharp with barely controlled anger. Because we're afraid they'll show us how wrong we've been? Because we're terrified they'll succeed where we've failed. The chamber erupted again. Ancient alliances, strained as species that had worked together for millennia, found themselves on opposite sides of a question that challenged everything they thought they knew about themselves. Zeftar activated his personal communicator and reviewed the intelligence reports that had been flooding in since Admiral Chen's transmission. What his government's analysts had discovered made his chitinous plates itch with nervous energy. The humans hadn't been idle during their 12,000 years of development. Deep space monitoring stations had detected massive energy signatures in the Sol system for the past 3 centuries, but they had been dismissed as natural phenomena. Solar flares, magnetic storms, the usual cosmic background noise that made long-range observation difficult. Now they knew better. Those energy signatures had been the humans testing technologies that made the Council's most advanced systems look like primitive toys. The reports painted a picture that defied belief. Humans had developed faster-than-light travel methods that left no detectable signatures. They had constructed habitats in space that could house billions of beings in perfect comfort. They had mastered energy manipulation on a scale that approached stellar engineering. Most disturbing of all, they had apparently been monitoring galactic communications for over 1,000 years. Every council session, every diplomatic exchange, every military planning meeting had been observed and recorded by human intelligence networks that remained completely invisible to galactic security systems. The quarantine had been a joke. While the galaxy ignored Earth had been studying the galaxy with a focused intensity of species that remembered what it meant to fight for survival. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority transmission. Zeftar glanced at his communicator and felt his blood freeze. The message was from his homeworld's defense command, marked with security codes reserved for the most extreme emergencies. Council Fleet Admiral to Ambassador Zeftar. Priority Alpha clearance required. Human vessels have been detected at the edge of Corvin space. They are unlike anything in our databases. Request immediate guidance on response protocols. Attached to the message were sensor readings that made no sense. The human ships registered on deep space scanners as objects roughly the size of small asteroids, but their energy output suggested power plants that could fuel entire star systems. They moved through space without any detectable propulsion signature, somehow accelerating to significant fractions of light speed without producing the radiation that such acceleration should have generated. Most concerning of all, they seemed to be scanning everything. Every planet, every station, every ship in their path was being subjected to sensor sweeps so detailed that they could probably count the individual molecules in a ship's hull plating. The humans weren't just announcing their presence to the Galactic Council. They were conducting a complete intelligence assessment of every major civilization in known space. Zeftar's hands trembled slightly as he forwarded the intelligence briefing to Speaker Vorthak's personal channel. Within moments, similar reports were arriving from throughout the galaxy. Human ships had appeared at the borders of every council member's territory, conducting the same detailed scans while maintaining a respectful but clearly unstoppable advance toward the galactic core. The realization hit the chamber like a physical wave. The humans hadn't just developed advanced technology. They had achieved strategic superiority on a scale that made traditional concepts of military power completely irrelevant. Speaker Vorthak's crystalline form pulsed with urgent light as he called for attention. I have just received reports from 17 different systems. Human vessels are conducting what can only be described as intelligence-gathering operations throughout Council space. They're not engaging with local forces, but they're also not responding to standard hail frequencies. The implications were staggering. A single unknown species was essentially conducting surveillance operations against every major civilization in the galaxy simultaneously. Such an action should have been impossible for logistical reasons alone, yet the evidence was undeniable. "They're mapping us," Delegate Thurian of the Centauri Mining Consortium said, his voice hollow with shock. "Not just our territories, but our capabilities, our weaknesses. They're conducting a complete strategic assessment of galactic civilization." The chamber fell silent as the full scope of what was happening became clear. The humans weren't just offering to help struggling civilizations. They were demonstrating that they possessed the capability to help or harm anyone they chose, anywhere in the galaxy, at any time they decided to act. It was the most polite, diplomatic, and absolutely terrifying display of power in recorded galactic history. The main holographic display activated again without warning, causing several delegates to reach for weapons that would be utterly useless against a species capable of hacking galactic communication networks at will. Admiral Chun appeared again, but this time she wasn't alone. Behind her stood representatives of other human leadership, their simple uniforms somehow more impressive than any ceremonial regalia in the chamber. What drew attention, however, wasn't their appearance, but their expressions. These were people who had made decisions that would reshape the galaxy, and they carried the weight of those decisions with quiet confidence. "Greetings again, honored delegates," Admiral Chen said, her voice carrying the same diplomatic courtesy as before. "I apologize for the surveillance operations currently being conducted in your territories. I want to assure you that this intelligence gathering is purely defensive in nature. We need to understand the current state of galactic civilization before we begin our assistance programs." The casual admission that they were conducting surveillance operations against every major power in known space sent a ripple of shock through the assembly. The humans weren't even pretending that this was anything other than a complete intelligence coup. "I also want to inform you that our first mission has been completed ahead of schedule. The Threnody star system has been stabilized, and the species itself has been relocated to temporary habitats while we restore their homeworld's biosphere. I'm pleased to report that all 3.7 billion Threnodai citizens survived the relocation process. The display showed images that defied comprehension. The dying star in the Kepler 442 system now burned with renewed vigor, its stellar fires somehow rekindled by human intervention. The planet that had been a frozen wasteland was showing signs of atmospheric restoration, with weather patterns that suggested a carefully managed terraforming process was already underway. More shocking still were the images of the Threnodai themselves. The species that Council records had written off as economically non-viable for relocation assistance were shown working alongside human engineers, learning to use technologies that would have taken them centuries to develop on their own. The Threnodai have agreed to serve as our first partners in what we're calling the new Uplift Initiative. Unlike the previous Uplift programs conducted by your species, we believe in transparency and consent. The Threnodai know exactly what we're offering, what we expect in return, and what their options are at every stage of the process. The display showed detailed documentation of a human approach to first contact and technological transfer. Every step was recorded, every decision explained, every cultural consideration addressed with a thoroughness that made the Council's own first contact protocols look crude by comparison. They have chosen to accept our offer of partnership. In return for sharing our technology and knowledge, they will serve as teachers and guides for other struggling civilizations. They will help us understand the specific needs of different species and cultures, ensuring that our assistance is appropriate and effective. The concept was revolutionary. Instead of the traditional model where advanced civilizations impose their standards on primitive ones, the humans were creating a network of mutual support where each species contributed their unique perspectives and capabilities. This is the model we will follow for all future Uplift operations. No civilization will be forced to accept our help. No species will be required to abandon their culture or values to receive assistance. No world will be left to struggle alone simply because they don't meet arbitrary standards of compatibility. Admiral Chin's expression became more serious as she continued. However, I must also inform you that we have identified several situations that require immediate intervention, regardless of Council policies. The display changed to show star charts, marking systems throughout the galaxy. Each marker was color-coded, but the meaning wasn't immediately clear. Our intelligence-gathering operations have revealed 47 civilizations currently facing extinction-level events. These range from natural disasters to internal conflicts to systematic persecution by more powerful neighbors. Council records indicate that 31 of these situations have been assessed as non-critical or outside Council jurisdiction. The implications hit like a hammer blow. The humans had identified dozens of species that were dying while the Galactic Council debated whether helping them would be politically convenient. We will be intervening in all 47 situations. Some will require stellar engineering, others will need medical assistance, and several will require what humans call diplomatic intervention. We will attempt to coordinate with local council representatives where possible, but we will not allow procedural delays to cost lives. The tone was respectful but inflexible. The humans were informing the council of their actions, not requesting permission. Additionally, we have identified 12 ongoing conflicts where more powerful civilizations are systematically oppressing weaker ones. Council records indicate that these situations have been classified as internal affairs and not subject to Council intervention. We disagree with this assessment. The display now showed detailed intelligence reports on conflicts that several Council members had hoped would remain hidden. Resource wars where advanced civilizations strip-mined primitive worlds. Cultural suppression campaigns designed to eliminate incompatible belief systems. Economic exploitation that kept entire species trapped in poverty while their resources enriched their galactic neighbors. We will be ending these conflicts through whatever means prove necessary. We prefer negotiation and peaceful resolution, but we are prepared to use more direct methods if required. The strong will no longer be permitted to prey upon the weak simply because it's convenient or profitable. The chamber erupted in outrage. Delegate after delegate stood to protest this casual announcement that humanity intended to single-handedly reshape galactic politics according to their own moral standards. Elder statesman Krell ADH was practically vibrating with fury. This is intolerable. You cannot simply declare yourselves the arbiters of galactic justice. The internal affairs of sovereign civilizations are not subject to interference by outside forces. Admiral Chin's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes grew colder. Sovereignty is a privilege that must be earned through responsible behavior. Civilizations that use their power to harm others forfeit their right to non-interference. The simple statement carried the weight of absolute conviction. The humans had apparently developed not just superior technology, but a moral framework that put the welfare of all sentient beings above the political convenience of established powers. Let me be clear about something, Admiral Chun continued, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making life and death decisions. We are not seeking to rule the galaxy. We are not attempting to establish an empire or impose our culture on others. We are simply going to ensure that every sentient being in known space has the opportunity to reach their full potential without interference from those who would exploit their weakness. The display showed more detailed plans for human intervention operations, medical technologies that could cure diseases considered incurable by current galactic medicine, agricultural techniques that could turn desert worlds into gardens, social management theories that could help fractured civilizations find common ground without sacrificing their unique identities. We spent 12,000 years learning from your gifts and developing our own understanding of what it means to be truly civilized. We learned that civilization is not measured by the height of your buildings or the speed of your ships, but by how you treat those who cannot defend themselves. The display changed to show Earth as it currently existed, but now the images focused on different aspects of human civilization. Cities where dozens of different species lived and worked together in harmony. Educational institutions where beings from across the galaxy learned advanced technologies and returned to their homeworlds as teachers and leaders. Research facilities where problems affecting multiple species were studied and solved through cooperative effort. This is what your gifts made possible, Admiral Chin said, gesturing to the images of interspecies cooperation. Not just advanced technology, but advanced thinking. The understanding that diversity is strength, that cooperation achieves more than competition, and that the measure of a civilization's success is determined by how it treats its weakest members. The implications were staggering. The humans hadn't just developed advanced technology during their isolation. They had created a completely different model of civilization, one based on principles that the Galactic Council claimed to support but had never actually implemented. We know that many of you are afraid of what we represent. Change is always frightening, especially for civilizations that have achieved comfortable stability. But stagnation is not peace, and maintaining the status quo is not the same as maintaining justice. The display now showed comparative statistics that made uncomfortable reading. Life expectancy rates across different galactic regions. Educational opportunities available to various species. Economic mobility indices for civilizations at different stages of development. The numbers painted a picture of a galaxy where comfort and advancement were available only to those species fortunate enough to be born into the right circumstances. These disparities are not the result of natural law or inevitable social evolution. They are the result of policy decisions made by beings who chose to preserve their own advantages rather than work for universal advancement. You have created a galaxy where accident of birth determines a being's entire future, and you have maintained that system because it benefits those with the power to change it. Admiral Chen's voice carried a note of sadness that made even the most defensive delegates shift uncomfortably. We understand why you made those choices. Fear of chaos, concern about unintended consequences, the natural tendency to preserve what you've already achieved rather than risk it for uncertain gains. But you forgot something important. You forgot that the beings suffering under your system of managed inequality are people, not statistics. The display changed again, this time showing individual faces from across the galaxy. Beings from dozens of species, all sharing expressions of hope and determination that transcended their physical differences. These were the faces of civilizations that had been written off as lost causes, species that had been deemed unworthy of assistance, worlds that had been abandoned to struggle alone. These are the people we're going to help, not because they can offer us anything in return, but because they need help and we have the ability to provide it. This is the debt we owe to the 3 species who saved us from extinction. Not just gratitude, but the commitment to pass their gift forward to others who need it. The scope of what the humans were proposing became clear. They weren't just offering to help a few struggling civilizations. They were proposing to fundamentally restructure galactic society according to principles of universal justice and mutual aid. We invite you to join us in this effort. Your species have knowledge and experience that could be invaluable in helping others. Your resources and capabilities combined with our technologies and organizational methods could transform the galaxy into something better than anyone has dared to imagine. The display showed projections of what galactic civilization could become under a cooperative model. Trade networks that ensured every world had access to necessary resources. Educational exchanges that allowed beings from primitive worlds to learn advanced techniques while sharing their own cultural insights. Defense networks that protected vulnerable civilizations from exploitation without creating dependency relationships. This is not conquest. This is not colonization. This is the largest cooperative effort in galactic history, designed to ensure that every sentient being has the opportunity to achieve their full potential regardless of the circumstances of their birth. Admiral Chun leaned forward, and suddenly every delegate in the chamber felt the weight of history pressing down on them. You have a choice to make. You can join us in building something better, or you can stand aside and watch as we do it without you. What you cannot do is maintain the current system of managed inequality and systematic abandonment of those who need help the most. The transmission paused, and Admiral Chen's expression became more serious than it had been throughout the entire presentation. I want to be completely clear about something. We are going to proceed with our assistance programs regardless of council approval or cooperation. The only question is whether you want to be part of the solution or merely observers to it. But this galaxy will change. The age of comfortable indifference to suffering is ending, whether you participate in ending it or not. The display showed a countdown timer that appeared to be measuring time until some significant deadline. The numbers were counting down from 72 standard hours. You have 3 days to decide. At the end of that period, we will begin full-scale assistance operations throughout the galaxy. We will publish complete documentation of our methods, share our technologies with any civilization that wants them, and provide support for any species that asks for help. The transformation of galactic civilization begins whether you join us or not. Admiral Chen stood, and her final words carried the weight of absolute determination. The children you saved have grown up. We learned everything you taught us, and we learned from your mistakes as well as your successes. Now we're going to show the galaxy what it looks like when someone truly commits to the principle that every life has value and every being deserves the chance to reach their full potential. The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. The humans had just given the Galactic Council an ultimatum disguised as an invitation. Join the most ambitious social transformation in galactic history, or be left behind as irrelevant relics of a less enlightened age. The countdown timer remained visible on every display in the chamber, marking the time until the galaxy would change forever. Ambassador Zeftar looked around at his fellow delegates and saw his own shock reflected in dozens of faces from dozens of worlds. The quarantined primitives from Sol 3 had just announced their intention to save the galaxy from itself, and they had the knowledge, technology, and moral conviction to actually do it. The only question was whether the established powers of galactic civilization were wise enough to help. If any 1 hour and 37 minutes remained on the countdown when Ambassador Zeftar received the transmission that changed everything. The message came through his personal diplomatic channel, marked with security codes that indicated it originated from the highest levels of Corvan government. The content was brief, but devastating. Human assistance fleet has arrived at Corvani Prime. They are requesting permission to begin medical intervention for the Crimson Plague. Our scientists estimate they could save the 17 million citizens currently in terminal stages. Political implications unknown. Request immediate guidance. Zeftar felt his chitinous plates go cold. The Crimson Plague had been ravaging the outer colonies of Corvan space for 3 years. Despite the best efforts of galactic medicine, the disease remained incurable. The infected faced a slow, painful death that current technology could delay, but not prevent. The Council's response had been to quarantine the affected worlds and allocate research funds for a long-term cure that might be developed within next century. 17 million beings were dying, but saving them was classified as economically unfeasible given current technological limitations. Apparently, the humans disagreed with that assessment. The chamber's main display activated without warning, showing not Admiral Chun, but a human medical officer standing in what appeared to be an advanced hospital facility. Behind her, Zeftar could see beings from multiple species working together with equipment that looked like it belonged in a completely different era of technological development. I am Dr. Elena Vasquez, Director of Emergency Medical Operations for the Terran Federation, the human announced. I am broadcasting from our mobile medical facility currently stationed in the Corvani system. We have successfully synthesized a cure for the pathogen your species calls the Crimson Plague. The implications hit the chamber like a physical force. The humans hadn't just claimed they could help struggling civilizations. They were demonstrating their capabilities in real time, solving problems that the galaxy's best minds had declared impossible. The cure requires approximately 48 hours to fully eliminate the pathogen from infected tissue, Dr. Vasquez continued. We have sufficient production capacity to treat all infected individuals in the Corvan colonies within the next week. We are requesting permission to begin immediate distribution of the cure to terminal patients. The display showed medical data that made every xenobiologist in the chamber lean forward in amazement. The humans had apparently analyzed and understood a pathogen that had baffled galactic researchers for years, then developed a cure using techniques that seemed to operate on fundamentally different principles than any known medical science. Additionally, we are prepared to share the synthesis protocols for this cure with any medical facility that wishes to produce it locally. We believe that medical knowledge belongs to all sentient beings and should not be restricted by political boundaries or economic considerations. Dr. Vasquez paused, and her expression became more serious. However, I must inform you that time is critical. Our analysis indicates that approximately 2,000 individuals will die in the next standard day if treatment is delayed further. We are prepared to begin emergency intervention immediately if local authorities consent. The transmission switched to show real-time medical statistics from the affected Corvan colonies. Individual patient data, survival projections, and treatment timelines painted a picture of mass suffering that could be ended within hours if the humans were allowed to act. Zeftar's communicator chimed with an urgent message from his government. Human medical team is requesting clearance to begin patient treatment. They claim they can save everyone. Our medical advisors confirm their data appears accurate. Request immediate authorization. Around the chamber, similar messages were arriving from governments throughout the galaxy. The humans hadn't just sent ships to the Corvan colonies. They had positioned medical assistance fleets at the sites of every major medical crisis in known space. Each team equipped to solve problems that local authorities had considered unsolvable. The scope of the operation was breathtaking. Dozens of civilizations simultaneously receiving offers of medical assistance for conditions that range from genetic disorders to environmental toxins to infectious diseases. Each human team demonstrated the same combination of advanced capability and respectful restraint, asking for permission rather than simply acting. But the countdown timer on every display continued its relentless advance toward zero, and the message was clear. With or without official approval, the humans were going to begin helping anyone who needed it. Elder statesman Krell ADH rose from his seat, his ceremonial robes billowing with agitation. This is medical blackmail. They present us with dying citizens and demand we accept their interference in our internal affairs. They're offering to save lives we've already written off as lost, Delegate Sirithal replied, her melodious voice sharp with anger. How is that blackmail? How is it anything other than the most basic moral obligation? The chamber erupted in heated debate, but underneath the political arguments, a fundamental shift was occurring. The humans had moved the discussion beyond abstract principles and diplomatic protocols to the most basic questions of life and death. Speaker Vorthack's crystalline form pulsed with urgent light as he called for attention. I have received confirmation from our intelligence services. Similar offers of medical assistance have been received by 43 different civilizations. The humans appear to have identified and prepared solutions for every major medical crisis currently affecting galactic civilization. The implications were staggering. While the Galactic Council had been debating the philosophical merits of intervention, the humans had been conducting a comprehensive analysis of every form of suffering they could potentially alleviate. Furthermore, Vorthack continued, preliminary analysis of their proposed treatments suggests success rates approaching 100% for conditions we have classified as incurable. Our medical experts are requesting immediate access to human research data to verify these claims. The display activated again, showing not Admiral Chun or Dr. Vasquez, but a different human entirely. This individual wore the simple gray uniform that seemed standard for human officials, but carried himself with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected entire civilizations. I am Director Marcus Webb, Coordinator of Strategic Operations for the new Uplift Initiative, he announced. I am broadcasting from the Zeta Reticuli system, where we have just concluded successful negotiations to end the territorial conflict that has been devastating this region for the past 2 centuries. The display showed images that defied belief. Representatives from 17 different species standing together in what appeared to be signing ceremonies for comprehensive peace accords. These were civilizations that had been locked in seemingly irreconcilable conflicts, yet somehow the humans had convinced them to lay down their weapons and work together. The resolution was achieved through the introduction of technologies that make resource scarcity obsolete and communication methods that allow for genuine cultural understanding between radically different species. All parties have agreed to implement cooperative development programs that will ensure mutual prosperity without territorial expansion. The scope of what the humans had accomplished was breathtaking. They hadn't just stopped a war, they had eliminated the underlying causes that made war seem necessary. Additionally, we have established educational exchange programs that will allow young beings from all participating species to learn advanced technologies while preserving and sharing their own cultural traditions. The diversity that once drove these civilizations apart will now become the foundation of their collective strength. Director Webb's expression became more serious as he continued. However, Our analysis has identified similar conflicts throughout the galaxy, many of which have been classified by Council authorities as internal affairs not subject to intervention. We respectfully disagree with this classification. The display showed a comprehensive map of ongoing conflicts across galactic space. Resource wars, territorial disputes, cultural suppressions, and economic exploitations were marked in different colors, creating a pattern that revealed the systematic nature of suffering that the Council had chosen to ignore. We will be implementing similar resolution protocols for all identified conflicts within the next standard month. Local authorities will be consulted, and their cooperation is preferred, but the continuation of unnecessary suffering is not negotiable. The tone was respectful, but inflexible. The humans were offering partnership, but they were also making it clear that they would proceed with their moral agenda regardless of political convenience. Our intervention in the Zeta Reticuli conflict has demonstrated the effectiveness of our approach. When species are given the tools to communicate honestly and the resources to meet their actual needs, most conflicts resolve naturally. The challenge is providing those tools and resources despite political resistance from those who benefit from maintaining the status quo. The implications hit the chamber like a hammer blow. The humans weren't just offering to solve technical problems. They were proposing to eliminate the systematic inequalities that made conflict inevitable. Ambassador Zeftar looked at his communicator and saw new messages arriving every few minutes. Reports from across Corvin space describing human intervention teams that were appearing wherever they were needed most. Medical teams treating incurable diseases. Engineering teams solving resource shortages. Diplomatic teams mediating conflicts that had seemed hopeless. Each intervention was conducted with the same pattern: respectful requests for cooperation, demonstration of superior capabilities, and offers to share knowledge and technology freely with anyone willing to use them responsibly. But the countdown timer continued its relentless advance, and with each passing hour, more governments were faced with the choice between accepting human assistance for their dying citizens or maintaining their political dignity while people suffered. The display changed again, and Admiral Chen reappeared. But this time she wasn't alone. Behind her stood beings from dozens of different species, all wearing the same simple uniforms that marked them as members of the Human-Led Assistance Network. I want to address the concerns that have been raised about human intentions, Admiral Chen announced. Some of you fear that we seek to establish dominance over galactic civilization. Others worry that we will impose human values and customs on unwilling species. These concerns are understandable but unfounded. The display showed detailed documentation of human intervention protocols. Every decision point was recorded, every cultural consideration was addressed, and every outcome was measured according to standards that prioritized local autonomy and self-determination. Our goal is not to rule, but to serve. We seek to provide tools and knowledge that allow each civilization to achieve its own vision of success according to its own values and traditions. We intervene only to prevent suffering and eliminate barriers to natural development. The beings standing behind Admiral Chen stepped forward, and each began speaking in their own language about their experiences with human assistance. Translators worked overtime to convey testimonials from species across the galaxy who had worked with human teams. The pattern was consistent across all testimonials. Humans provided advanced technologies and knowledge, but always as gifts rather than tools of control. They taught techniques for solving problems, but never dictated how those techniques should be used. They offered partnership as equals rather than demanding subordination. The question before this council is not whether humanity has the right to help struggling civilizations, Admiral Chen continued. The question is whether the established powers of galactic civilization have the wisdom to participate in building something better than what currently exists. The display showed comparative projections of galactic development under the current system versus projections based on human intervention models. The differences were staggering. Under current policies, most struggling civilizations would remain trapped in cycles of scarcity and conflict for centuries to come. Under human assistance programs, the same civilizations could achieve advanced status within decades while preserving their unique cultural identities. We are not asking you to abandon your achievements or sacrifice your prosperity. We are asking you to use your capabilities to help others achieve similar prosperity through cooperative effort rather than competitive struggle. Admiral Chen's expression became more intense as she continued. But let me be absolutely clear about one thing. We're going to proceed with our assistance programs regardless of council approval. The dying will be healed. The suffering will be comforted. The oppressed will be protected. The only question is whether you want to be part of the solution or merely observers to it. The countdown timer now showed less than 24 hours remaining. Around the galaxy, human assistance teams were standing ready to begin operations that would transform dozens of civilizations according to principles that prioritized universal welfare over political convenience. In 16 hours, we will begin full-scale implementation of emergency assistance protocols. Medical teams will start treating terminal patients. Engineering teams will begin resource distribution to populations facing scarcity. Diplomatic teams will commence mediation of conflicts that threaten civilian populations. The scope of what the humans were proposing was unprecedented in galactic history. A single civilization taking unilateral action to address suffering throughout known space, using capabilities that made traditional concepts of sovereignty and territorial integrity effectively meaningless. Additionally, we will begin broadcasting educational programs that share our technologies and techniques with any civilization that wishes to receive them. Knowledge will be freely available to anyone who wants to learn, regardless of their government's political position regarding human assistance. The implications were revolutionary. The humans were offering to bypass traditional diplomatic and political channels entirely, providing their gifts directly to any being or civilization that wanted them. This is not conquest. This is not colonization. This is the largest cooperative effort in galactic history, designed to eliminate unnecessary suffering and provide every sentient being with the tools they need to reach their full potential. Admiral Chun paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. 12,000 years ago, 3 species saved humanity from extinction. They gave us knowledge, tools, and hope when we had nothing left but desperation. We promised ourselves that someday we would repay that debt by extending the same gift to others who needed it. The display showed Earth as it had been during the last ice age, a frozen world where primitive humans struggled against impossible odds. Then, it showed Earth as it currently existed, a thriving center of interstellar civilization where beings from across the galaxy lived and learned together in harmony. This is what your ancestors made possible. Not just human survival, but human growth into something worthy of the gift we received. We learned everything you taught us, and we learned from your mistakes as well as your successes. Now we're ready to fulfill our promise. The beings standing behind Admiral Chun stepped forward again, but this time they spoke in perfect unison, their words translated into every language represented in the chamber. The debt is being repaid. The gift is being passed forward. The age of unnecessary suffering is ending. Join us, or stand aside, but the transformation begins now. The transmission ended, and the chamber fell into absolute silence. The countdown timer showed 18 hours and 43 minutes remaining until humanity began reshaping galactic civilization according to their own moral imperatives. Ambassador Zeftar looked around the chamber and saw the same realization dawning on dozens of faces from dozens of worlds. The humans hadn't come to ask permission. They had come to announce their intentions and offer partnership to those wise enough to accept it. The quarantined primitives from Sol 3 had become the most powerful civilization in galactic history, and they were using that power to save everyone else, whether the established authorities wanted to be saved or not. His communicator chimed with another urgent message from his homeworld. Human medical teams are reporting complete success with initial test treatments. The Crimson Plague cure works exactly as promised. 17 million lives could be saved if we authorize full treatment protocols. Request immediate decision. Similar messages were flooding in from governments across the galaxy. The humans had demonstrated their capabilities, proven their intentions, and offered partnership in the most ambitious social transformation in recorded history. The only question remaining was whether the galaxy's established powers were wise enough to help humanity save civilization from itself, or foolish enough to stand in the way of the most benevolent revolution in galactic history. Ambassador Zeftar looked at the countdown timer, thought about 17 million dying citizens who could be saved with a simple authorization, and reached for his communicator to cast the most important vote of his life. The children of Earth had grown up and come home to fulfill their promise. The galaxy would never be the same, and perhaps for the first time in millennia, that was exactly what it needed.